Hi, I'm Any New Province, and this is Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefit of net decking in Pauper. Today we're playing Mono Green Stompy, or more specifically, the Mono Green Stompy list that Dissonance used to win the Pauper Challenge this weekend. Before I get into the deck tech, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd really appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you enjoy my videos, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. It feels like Stompy has always been around, but it really came into its own when Burning Tree Emissary was downshifted to common. Burning Tree Emissary allows for super scary fast starts from this deck. They can play all 4 of them in the same turn, and that turn is turn 2. If you have just a bunch of bears swinging at you for 8 on turn 3, you better have a pretty good plan to deal with them if you want to survive to the end of the match. You'd be quick to call Stompy a one-trick pit skulk, but it's certainly not that. Stompy has a ton of value creatures that help it get into the late game. It also has evasive creatures that help if the board stalls out, and all of its interaction comes in the form of pump spells. It's pretty easy to just use those pump spells as removal or even as a way to save your creatures from removal, and with all the value creatures and evasion coming around, this deck can actually look a little bit more like mid-range. While Stompy can sometimes look like mid-range, it is still the quintessential Pauper aggressive deck. That means every little creature counts, so I'll start by explaining the creatures first. First we have Nettle Sentinel, which is a 1-mana 2/2, making it a great threat. It does have a condition. It says Nettle Sentinel doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever you cast a green spell, you may untap Nettle Sentinel. So sometimes if we don't have any cards in hand, we can't untap our Nettle Sentinels, but most of the time we can because we're running so few lands and so many green spells. Next we have Skargon Pit Skulk, which I think is one of the hardest Stompy creatures to deal with. It's a 1-mana 1/1 that has Bloodthirst 1. Bloodthirst says if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Creatures with power less than Skargon Pit Skulk's power can't block it. That makes it a very good evasive threat. There's a bunch of little creatures running around in Pauper that would love to get in the way of a Skargon Pit Skulk, but can't because of this ability. Next we have Vault Scourge, which is a 2-mana 1/1 flyer with lifelink. You can pay for 1 of that mana with Phyrexian mana, which means you can just use 2 of your life to pay for it. That's alright, and you won't mind paying 2 life for the Vault Scourge because it has lifelink, so as soon as it pecks in a couple of times, it really just pays for itself. You're probably more used to seeing this next creature in decks like Boggles because of its hexproof ability. We're playing it here so that our opponents at least have 1 creature in our deck that they can't deal with targeted removal. This is Solana Ledgewalker. It's a 2-mana 1/1 with hexproof, and Solana Ledgewalker can't be blocked except by creatures with flying. It's an evasive little beater that's hard to deal with, and we're glad to stick a bunch of enchantments on it just like Boggles. Speaking of being good against targeted removal, this is Young Wolf. Young Wolf is a 1-mana 1/1 with Undying, which means when it dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, we get to return it to the battlefield under our control with another +1/+1 counter on it. This means that if Young Wolf gets hit by targeted removal, maybe it had a Rancor on it, we get both of those cards back and we can deploy them again as threats on the following turn. Nest Invader is our next card, and this is always an interesting one. Nest Invader is a 2-mana 2/2, so a bear, but when it enters the battlefield, we create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token that says, sacrifice a creature, add colorless to your mana pool. There's actually a card in our deck that cares about creatures dying, making this relevant, but sometimes we also just suit up that Eldrazi spawn to start getting in. Next is Quirion Ranger. Quirion Ranger is a 1-mana 1/1 elf, you see it in elves a lot, and it says, return a forest you control to its owner's hand to untap target creature. Activate this ability only once each turn. We use Quirion Ranger to do a couple of things. We want to untap our Nettle Sentinels, maybe to use some of our sideboard Viridian Longbows. We also want to use it to make our land drops, so we don't run a ton of lands in this deck. We can pick up a forest after we tap it for mana, play it again, and get us up to 2 mana. Maybe we play a Nest Invader or a Burning Tree Emissary, get some more mana. Quirion Ranger just does a good amount of things for our mana base. Our last but certainly not least creature is Burning Tree Emissary. Burning Tree Emissary costs 2 hybrid red and green mana, and it says, when Burning Tree Emissary enters the battlefield, add red-green to your mana pool. It's a 2/2. This isn't any ordinary bear. This is the card that enables insane starts out of this deck. Usually your opponent, if they're on Stompy, I've only ever seen opponents on Stompy, I've never played this deck. But anyway, they play their Burning Tree Emissary, and then you think there's probably another Burning Tree Emissary. There usually is, and then there's usually like a Nest Invader and a Rancor, and they just play out their whole hand. It's disgusting. Next, we have the interactive part of this deck, which is pump spells and enchantments. I'll start with the pump spells. First, we have Vines of the Vastwood, which costs 1 mana and has kicker 1 green, which means you can pay an additional green as you cast it to get its kicker effect. It says, target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. If Vines of the Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. This is a really interesting card because first of all, it can just make a creature huge to punch through lethal damage. You can use it to make it so your opponents can't target your creatures with removal, or you can make it so your opponent can't target their own creatures with a spell that they want to resolve. Next, we have Hunger of the Howl Pack. It's a 1-mana instant that says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, which is sometimes just fine, but what we really want to do is trigger Morbid, which says put 3 +1/+1 counters on that creature instead if a creature died this turn. So we want to try to make something die, which we can even enable ourselves with our Eldrazi spawn token. We play Hunger of the Howl Pack, make a huge creature, and then our opponent has to deal with something like trying to block a massive Skargan Pitskulk or remove a Solana Ledgewalker with all these counters on it. Next, we have Elephant Guide, another answer to removal. Elephant Guide says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3. Again, a pretty good effect on its own, but it also says when enchanted creature dies, create a 3/3 green elephant creature token. That means if they kill one of our 1-mana creatures that has an Elephant Guide on it after it's hit them for 4 a few times, we still get a 3/3 elephant left over to put rankers on. And here are our Rancors. Rancor says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. When Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. It only costs 1 mana. So if Rancor gets destroyed by something or if the creature dies, we just get to get the Rancor back and give something else +2/+0. This is just an awesome card for giving us reach with trample. It keeps coming back, so as long as we can play around our opponent's kind of, removal or counter spells in the correct way, we just always give our creatures a +2/+0 buff. Alright, let's talk about this mana base. It's 17 forests. And here's the sideboard. First, we have 4 Scattershot Archers. They're a 1-mana 1/1 that have Scattershot Archer deals 1 damage to each creature with flying. You have to tap it to do that. Scattershot Archer is really great against Battle Screech tokens or against Delver occasionally. If we can untap it with Quirion Ranger, we can really dish out a good amount of damage. Next, we have Viridian Longbow that says equipped creature has tapped. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Viridian Longbow lets us remove our opponent's creatures if we have to, if they got a bunch of little elf dorks running around we have to deal with, and it's also kind of good for closing out the game if our opponent has a lot of fogs. We also have 4 Epic Confrontation, which says target creature gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. It's a sorcery, so we kind of have to manufacture a situation where this is good, but this is still just a great removal spell, and we can use our creatures to remove a good amount of things with it. Next, we have Gleeful Sabotage, 4 of them, and it's our last sideboard card. Gleeful Sabotage says destroy target artifact or enchantment, and it has Conspire, which means as you cast this spell, you may tap any untapped creatures you control, you have to tap 2 of them, that share a color with it. When you do, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So we're trying to tap our creatures to Conspire Gleeful Sabotage. We've got mostly green creatures, so that'll be easy. It's going to blow up some artifacts and enchantments out of decks like Affinity and Boggles. So there it is, Mono Green Stompy. We're going to take this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince. We're there every Monday night playing competitive Pauper decks. I certainly hope I can do as well with this as Dissonance did. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This has been Dissonance's Mono Green Stompy that he won the challenge with. I hope I can do somewhat near the same, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday night.